What's behind the tin shed? Throughout rural Victoria, you often come across a tin shed sitting in otherwise vacant land. Most of these are farming sheds, but all of those shown here house fire trucks. This presentation focuses on one such shed, a shed that houses the trucks of the Bolinda Monegeetta Rural Fire Brigade. If you drive through Bolinda and you don't blink, you might see a primary school, a hall and a shed. Monegeetta is a bit bigger but not much. The nothing to the passing traveller is the centre of the universe to the people who live here, but living here means coping with the threat of bushfires. In true Aussie rural spirit, volunteers give their time freely to form fire brigades, training and turning out on the trucks to protect their communities. But firefighters are not the only ones involved in keeping people safe. They are supported by their own communities, and in particular they're helped by their families. The families interviewed here are celebrated by the Bolinda Monegeetta Brigade, but they are typical of rural families generally, and they provide a narrative of what lies behind tin sheds. Similar stories could be told of what lies behind each of the other sheds that house fire trucks throughout rural Victoria.
What is your most memorable experience at fighting fires?
Well, there's a lot. I've been to a lot of fires. I suppose there's Black Saturday, which I think is probably the most memorable because of its huge impact that it had on everybody. But the Ash Wednesday fires, or the pre-Ash Wednesday fires that we had through the area that actually created a fire break for the Ash Wednesday fire that went from Straws Lane, the other side of Mount Macedon, to Reynolds Creek. That was a lifesaver for the rest of the area for the fires.
Dave Allen has already explained that one to us.
Yes, okay. Yeah, well, no, we were went up a road, Yamba Road, and went around the back of a house.
Which fire is this, Ash Wednesday?
Yeah, the pre-Ash Wednesday fire.
Okay.
We went around the back of the house and we picked up a young bloke that was there, which lucky we did, because otherwise he wouldn't have got out and his car got burnt. And we went around the back of the house. Ross Sullivan was driving, and we drove over. The old days, it was just a flat septic tank, a square box with a concrete lid over it, and we drove over that and the back wheel went in. So that's where we stayed for quite a while, and there was pine trees north, south and east, west. The ones north, south went up in a fireball. Lucky they were the other side of the house. The house was a brick house, which I didn't find out that it was a brick house until 2 weeks later when I went back there, because I thought it was weatherboard the way it went up. And we stayed in that septic tank until we got pulled out by the Army wrecker that got called in on the radio to save us, to get us out.
Must have been a frightening experience.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, especially after the trees going north-south went up in a fireball and we were directly underneath the ones going east-west. It's just the wind wasn't going that way. But there was burning embers. They started to burn up in amongst them. And of course, back in those days, you didn't have protective gear like you have now. You just went out in long-sleeve shirt and trousers. When I got back to Reynolds Creek, somebody said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "Why?" And they said, "I had a hole about 4 to 6 inches across burnt the back of my shirt. I didn't even know about." So yeah.
You've had a long history of living in this area and seen how people live in relation to fires. They're one of the things we have to cope with. Have you noticed any change in how farmers manage their land to protect themselves from fire?
I have noticed that a lot of properties are not grazed out. There's a lot of properties, and I used to really notice it driving through Kerry on the way to work. Properties just had no stock. And
Why would that be, do you think?
I have no idea, but there was quite a bit of fuel build-up in some properties. And I know Dad was very vigilant with fire prevention, and he often, or usually, ploughed fire breaks, particularly on the western front of the place facing the Melbourne Lancefield Road, and sometimes had fallow paddocks, just ploughed land for the summer, or he planted green crops, or at least strips of green crop around the property
What sort
and the
of green
houses.
crops would they be?
Things like rape
Okay.
and things. And there was actually a fire next door quite a few years ago, and was burning with a south wind towards our place, and it was slowed down by the old remnants of the stone wall. When it got through that, it was then basically stopped by the plough paddock.
Right, so it was a very effective.
It was very effective, and yet these days you see people slash a couple of little rings around, and that's about all. So very different. You don't see the green crops. And even the property that Dad bought when he moved down to the Minja area, that house had been saved by the previous owner planting a rape crop around the northwest side of the house, and it split the fire and it went around it, and the house and sheds were all saved. Original hardware store, and it was Tom Reynolds House, who was a member of Parliament at the time. He'd built a new house a couple of streets behind, and they moved out. We moved straight into their place.
So where was Tom Reynolds' house?
It was next to the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, it's got I don't know if it's still a restaurant. It's got the Chinese restaurant sign. Well, that was Tom Reynolds' house, and he had the original hardware business was next to it, which became a service station, which was very other things.
Now it's closed down and...
Yeah, but we lived in that house, and the fire shed was next to us.
On the other side, where the pizza place is now.
Yeah, which was great, because during the Ash Wednesday fires, and all those fires for weeks and weeks and weeks, we had fire trucks with their radios going all night, filling up. We didn't sleep for weeks. It was like, ah! So not only were we trying to cope, because I was teaching at Romsey at the time, and of course a lot of kids had come from up in the hills, and the first day of teaching at that school I had prep, so the kids' first day of school, half of them had slept in the school or somewhere else. Some of them were still in, like boys in pink pyjamas because they'd stayed at friend's place, or that was all they had, and somebody bought some pyjamas up for kids to sleep in, and they were in pink pyjamas when they started school, and it was pretty crazy. And we'd been down here like all night on being vigilant and everything with fires, so we hadn't slept. And for weeks, months, any time there was a siren or they could even smell the slightest whiff of smoke, those kids went right off. And it was really quite challenging, because some of them did lose homes and stuff like that. And they didn't know where their parents were. You know, they were separated from their parents because they'd been somewhere and parents were somewhere else. They didn't know what was going on. It was quite a challenge. So, and I had a teacher who was supposed to be helping me with this, because I had 30 preps or something. It was some ridiculous number of kids. And I'd never met them before until the first day of school, because I was appointed right at the end of the school year. And the assistant was supposed to help me. Her property was up at Cherokee, and of course she wasn't at school. So they sent one of the a relief teacher whose son was in prep, so she knew most of the kids, so that to help, because it was really quite a challenge.
And that was the old primary school.
The old primary school, right on the road, yeah, the main road. Yeah.
Rod, the brigade used to do a lot of protective works, doing fire breaks and that sort of thing, and that seems to have slowed down recently. Is that your impression?
Oh, it definitely has. I mean, the brigade used to do lots of burns. Used to do the Chinton Road, that used to get burnt. Heath Lane used to get burnt. The Riddle Road used to get burnt. You know, not every year, not all of it. I mean, a lot of it had to get burnt because it was rocks, so you couldn't slash it. The landowners couldn't control it. But now it's just, I think it's a matter of getting members to be able to do it and getting the protocol through so that you can be there. You can get authority to be able to do it, because you just can't go and say we're going to light up the side of the road and burn it. It's just not allowed to do it anymore.
Yeah. But I noticed your family burns their paddock, which basically is on the north side of Monegeetta Township and protects that every year. I notice you burn that.
Yeah, we have been burning it over the last few years. Mainly, I mean, it was for a fire break. We didn't have stock on it, and it had a lot of chili and needlegrass on it. And one of the best ways to control that is through burning. So hopefully now we might have that under control. And then if it gets eaten down, I mean, it won't be a problem. But it was a good way of controlling it. We used to plough the lane and burn the lane every year when we were, 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's certainly providing a good fire break for the township now.
Oh, it certainly helps. I mean, everything helps these days.
Rod, your dad was obviously a very busy person with his businesses, developing things, building things, very busy man, and yet he was a firefighter and eventually becoming captain of the brigade. What happened to the rest of the family and what happened to the business when he was out fighting fires?
Same as what happens to everybody else is when you're a member of a local brigade.
Tell me.
You just do it.
You just do it.
You do it.
I mean, you've got the sawmill is closed now, but you've got the business of building supplies and things like that. You've got 3 members directly employed by the mill, plus your sister, I think. Is that right? One sister?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when there's a fire, what happens? Who runs the mill?
Well, we've got staff. We don't all go away. Depends on where it is. I mean, if it was north of us, we'd all be involved. But if it's a little bit, if it's out of the area, either Donald or I'll go. Brian goes where he can, wherever he can. But it's normally only Don or I that'd go. Back in, when Dad was a member, you'd drop things and go. He had a
And do
tank.
you boys have to fill in around the place?
Yeah, I guess we did back then. I mean, it was only local fires back then. Like now you've got strike teams, long haul, short haul. Back then your local fires were your local fires. You didn't go off to different areas like you do now. So, mind you, there was probably, I don't know whether there was more fires back then. There's a hell of a lot more call-outs now.
And your mum had a role in the brigade too, I believe.
Yeah, because she had the shop, she was a communications officer back then, and I think it's still on the shop. There's a siren on top of the shop that she had a switch just inside the door so that whenever a fire went off, she'd sound the siren because the station was down at Bolinda. So in Monegeetta, she'd sound the siren up here to let people know. And if the siren stayed on, then it was a local fire, so people knew that to come to it. If it was just on and off, then it was they just needed crew to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The families interviewed, while unique in themselves, are typical of the brigade communities scattered throughout rural Australia. Some communities have no more than a tin shed housing the fire truck, but the core motivation of each brigade is the determination to protect its community.